Hi everybody, welcome to today's webinar. We're just going to let lots of people join. I can see you all entering the room. We'll be getting going in a minute or two when the numbers have stabilised, but you're all very welcome and it's great to see you. Hi everyone who's just joined us. Welcome to today's webinar. We will be kicking off in a couple of minutes. I just want to let the numbers climb a bit while you're all still joining us here. Okay, everyone, I think we're going to get going. I think there might still be some people joining us, but the beginning bit is just some housekeeping. So welcome to today's webinar, everyone. I'm Anna from the TUC, and I'm joined by Eugene and another Anna, and we'll be getting to them in just a second. So we've got a little bit different setup today. As you can see, we're on Zoom, so the captions work slightly differently on here. We do have live captions. At the bottom of the screen, there should be a button with 3 dots that says more. If you click that, you will be able to see the captions, so you can follow along that way. Great to see so many of you already saying hello in the chat panel. We love to hear what's going on in your workplaces. So please do use that to exchange tips and ideas. We are also going to be taking questions from you. So do please post any questions for Eugene or for Anna in the Q&A box, which is along the bottom of the screen where it's 2 speech bubbles that say Q&A. We'll get to those after the main bits of the presentation. And we are this webinar, so if you miss anything, don't worry, we'll send you a link to the recording along with any resources that will be helpful for you on this subject. So today's webinar is about the transformation that we've seen in our workplaces through AI, through artificial intelligence. And I will admit this is a subject I don't know very much about, so I'm hoping to learn a lot today from Eugene and from Anna. So first of all, we're going to hear from Anna Thomas, who's from the Institute for the Future of Work. She's going to tell us about some of the changes we have seen recently in this area and what we can look forward to coming up. So Anna, over to you, and yeah, we'll get going with the subject.
Thank you very much, Anna. Really great to be here and to meet you all remotely. Thank you very much for having me, and thank you for being here. It's brilliant that you are here because this is really such an important topic, and it's growing in importance. It's in some ways quite cutting edge, but it's affecting our work and sort of relationships and how we do our work, who has access to it, and how we also perform our jobs as trade union officials and representatives more than perhaps we anticipated, and in ways that sometimes are kind of hidden or difficult to access. There will be loads of questions, I'm sure. I'll really do my best to answer them, but we'll circulate the slides afterwards to pick up things that may be helpful if things have been missed. And you're welcome to send me questions too, because it's part of a journey for all of us, a kind of learning journey about how exactly these changes are happening to our work, as well as what we are able to do about them. And part of the factors going through, one of the most important things we can do is to to share those questions and that learning with each other, and realize that we're all learning together and that nobody knows, because it's impossible to know exactly how the changes are rolling out, for reasons that will surface, I hope, in the course of going through this training. I'm going to get the help of the TUC to go through some of these slides. We're going to be talking about an impact assessment model. It will become clear, I hope, that although we're calling it just an impact assessment, in a sense, it's a way of thinking about and understanding and responding to changes more deeply. And it's a sort of accessible way, a process that can be tagged on to collective bargaining or ways to access information, which should basically help you be as effective as possible, and to access as much information as you can about changes so that you can decide how to respond to them. Great. So if we could start the slides, that would be fantastic. I'll aim to go through why we think that we do need an algorithmic impact assessment, a good work algorithmic impact assessment, and what it looks like, who should be involved, and how you can use this tool in a sort of practical way. A little bit about us. We're independent, we're a charity, and our particular focus is exploring new technologies and how they're transforming work and working lives. So this, in a sense, is something we've been coming to for a very long time, and we're able to use the research that we've done about impacts to inform our model, and then perhaps how you may be able to use it. Next slide, please. The video we're going to treat you, we're going to have at the end, so we can get through to the discussion as fast as we can. So the next slide, please. I think but again, before we start with the actual process, it's a good idea to sort of recap about how it's changing work. So the headlines tend to be that robots are coming for our jobs, but we know increasingly, although that remains a risk, substitution, and is happening to some extent, that there are loads of other ways that AI is changing work or driving changes to work beyond just replacing workers. And it's changing things at a kind of macroeconomic level. So who gets access to jobs and what they are. It's changing things like at a firm level. So it's changing business models, as well as the skills needed or asked for by firms, and the relationships between employers, union representatives and workers, and also inside jobs. It's changing the nature of what's done. It's creating some jobs. It's augmenting, it has the capacity to sort of augment and help the things that you do, but it has the capacity to do the reverse as well and make things more intense. For example, without apportioning fair rewards or being fair about how that happens. And we've also seen other things through COVID, like remote work. That's also something that's being driven by AI, even though it might not be clear initially that that's what the driver is. And it's affecting work in ways with which you'll be really familiar as trade union representatives and officials, including changing sort of pay structures, pay variations, how you may access work, shift allocations, and basic things about terms and conditions, which may change and may, for example, be made less beneficial as well as potentially more beneficial. Again, sometimes without being super clear about why that is. And this in a sense is your bread and butter and the stuff of collective bargaining. But to understand what that's happening and how to challenge it, it may help to find out more information about the AI mechanisms, the AI tools and systems that are actually being used in the workplace. So what will it do? So the system of an impact assessment is a system that you will be familiar with to some extent through, for example, doing things like equality impact assessments or data protection impact assessments. So there'll be elements that you recognise, but what it's really about is trying to sort of set up a framework or a process to identify in advance, as early as you possibly can, or we possibly can, what the risks and the opportunities and the impacts are on the most fundamental aspects of work that we do and how we do it. Ideally, we do it before a system's put into place, but increasingly that's really tough to do sometimes, because a lot of the changes are incremental, and it may be a series of things that happen over a period of time, adding features or changing features. And so it's also something that we're suggesting can be raised at times other than the introduction of a new system. We'd like to flag that it's also consistent with the fantastic work that TUC did on their AI bill, in particular the part of it about mandating workplace risk assessments. It's also right that we think, although it can be raised now on the back of collective bargaining, as we'll come to, as a best practice, and it's something we're also trying to get employers to do, in an ideal world, it would be clarified in legislation, and there would be a requirement to do this good work or decent work impact assessment before and during technology was introduced, and then monitoring its core impacts on work throughout its life cycle. Why a good work AI? What's particularly useful or special about it, or this model? It engages the whole workforce. It elevates the roles of union and representatives, right to be really central in that sort of technology introduction and central and monitoring process. The overall aim is to deliver decent, good work in the age of AI in a way that we'll come on to define, and that it reflects what the TUC and what the ILO have been saying about what good work and decent work should be. Which needs fresh thinking about how to apply those principles in the AI, in the world of AI, and as our work and business models of work and business models are changing. It also offers something that should become an embedded ongoing process. So once it's set up, there should be a forum or a mechanism or a structure to keep going, to keep engaging with you in this new detail, in this more in-depth way, and to keep an eye and share information about these significant impacts on work and changes to work terms, conditions, and quality. That's how we're defining good work as an organisation, and I hope this speaks to you too. It's work that promotes dignity, autonomy, and equality. It has fair pay and conditions, and where people are properly supported to develop their talents and have a sense of community. The research tells us that, in fact, these sort of dimensions of good work are all being affected in different ways and for different reasons by the introduction of AI. And being driven by AI and the sort of secondary effects like changing business models that we are beginning to see across the country. So we've done a survey of 5,000 employees, an independent one with academics, with the UCL, and we've also done one with Warwick Business School, 1,000 firms. And we're now pretty sure that not only these dimensions are being affected, these dimensions of good work and good quality, including terms and conditions of work, but also that really focusing on work quality and good work, as we've defined it, is a way of is a really effective way of getting better outcomes. And a good perhaps message for your employers as well as one for us to think about, is that if it's done well with really good levels of engagement and engagement with you and with workers too, our work suggests it has better outcomes for productivity and for firms too. And so this is a sort of relatively new message that we're trying to get out. Do please help us do that. So it can be good for work. We know the outcomes can all be across the dimensions of good work. It has the potential to improve everything that we've just spoken about, but it can go both ways, and it takes work to make it work. It sort of needs a proactive approach to think about those impacts and think about how they can be, how those risks can be reduced and how those beneficial outcomes can be actively promoted. It won't necessarily happen on its own accord. So who can undertake this assessment? Technologists could undertake it, employers definitely can, but unions, we think, have a special role here because it could be initiated as part of a collective bargaining process, and voluntary agreements are probably one of the best ways in which this system can be introduced and set up. It can also be introduced as part of consultation on workplace automation, which is becoming increasingly common, and we anticipate and hope will become firmed up in due course. The stage now, the diagram may look complicated, but in fact, it's fairly intuitive. There's a preliminary stage when you set up, which will go through what needs to be done as the basic, and which will help you define the remit of what you're doing if there's any real focus that you're concerned about, or particularly significant area that you need to forefront and focus on first. And also if there are any documents or other information that you need before you can proceed. And then it's a stage, a sort of like a cycle, which we're seeing increasingly as a cycle, a framework to identify your stakeholders and involve, anticipate what's going to happen as best you can, while recognizing it's never going to be perfect and always more information will surface, to take appropriate steps to act, and then to monitor on an ongoing basis. We can probably, with a 9 o'clock, move past this a bit faster, Anna, unless you say otherwise, and then come back to the slides if you want more information at a later stage. The best thing to do is set up an initial assessment team, which will definitely involve union representatives and are likely to involve others in the organisation too, because it usually involves a number of people in a number of roles. It's cross-cutting the impacts on AI. It's not just going to be a data protection officer or a technology officer. It could be a CTO, it could be a CEO, it could be an internal compliance chief or a quality officer. We've done checklists so you can see who you think might be a good person to be engaged in the process, and who you think you can you can invite to join in practice. And that will help you figure out exactly what the assessment process will look like in your organisation with regard to the issue that you are, the technology introduction that you are focusing on. You can use our charter. Our charter of good work is an impact checklist. As I've said, our research suggests that those 10 dimensions also act as a checklist. And so in Parliament and in other areas, it's beginning to be accepted as a sort of checklist of impact areas, and you can go through them to see which ones you think are going to be most likely to be affected in your case. And we've got some examples of how to do that. I think we can move on probably a bit faster. So the first stage one is involve. And there's a long history of Human Rights Act assessments, as well as the other assessments that I've mentioned, that emphasises the importance of really thinking about and identifying who is most likely to be affected. So what do we think that this technology introduction will affect? And we can think about sort of people that will affect in the front line, people are actually using it and interacting with it on an everyday basis, and then perhaps secondary effects, so people whose job will be affected anyway, which will usually take a discussion and learning process, and will take definitely discussion with a number with workers, as well as with representatives potentially across the organisation, to see who you think will be affected directly or indirectly, and contact them to offer the opportunity to be engaged in the process. That can result in a plan as to how you'll proceed, and there'll be choices of methods which we can help with in our resources. The next stage is a deep dive into the risk and impact. This is a real deep dive, again, using the charter as a checklist, into what you think the risks and likely impacts will be. Some things will be clear. You may be able to see immediately that it will affect access. So there's a risk, for example, of redundancy. And there'll be other things, some risks to equality, for example, or some risks to other aspects of it, like health and well-being, that you may suspect may be impacted, especially when you look at the resources that are available, existing ones the TUC has, or health and safety officer, your health and safety officer have, but also ones that we have too. But you're not sure yet, so you want to so you identify it as a risk, but you highlight it as something you want to keep an eye on, and have an ongoing process for checking in and seeing if that's changed. Action, the next is action. This is actually going to be tricky in practice, and which is why you'll need an assessment team to help work it out, and a decision about methods, about how you go about doing it, because the first thing you'll want to do, of course, is stop anything you think is harmful, but then there's a more complicated process about how you can mitigate and minimize things that you think are likely to be a risk or an adverse impact, but aren't a breach of anything particular, or trade-offs where you may get an opportunity or a choice between one option or another option. And they may be changes even to the system. They may be changes to a pay model, or proposals for a different pay structure, or a different a different shift allocation system, or they may be the introduction of a new policy. The range is huge, and it will depend on your context. And it's quite likely that you'll want to get in touch with others in your union to discuss what the options are and how best to resolve that. Again, I emphasize the importance of documenting that as best you can and sharing the information internally and perhaps with the TUC as well, so we can begin to build a picture of what's happening, what you want, and what's feasible and what needs support to implement further in practice. We recommend sort of capturing this in an impact action plan. In an ideal world, and what we're aiming for is agreement both within the team and with the employer. And if you have managed to agree the principle of the Good Work Algorithmic Impact Assessment as part of collective bargaining, this is likely, we think, to make this tricky stage, this perhaps hardest stage, more likely to be effective in practice. Monitoring is setting up the process, which is not just the principle of that, but also perhaps a forum or way of doing that inside the organisation and the firm, where it's accepted that the impacts need to be watched and watched closely. And you'll need to think about how that will happen and how often you will check in or revise the plan or processes that we're suggesting. It's particularly important for hidden or cumulative impacts, for example, health impacts, which may, and stress, for example, being one of them, or the consequences of intensification, which you may suspect or are being reported, but may accumulate and become more pronounced over time, and therefore suggest that different types of action are appropriate. It may involve repurposing a forum that you have already, a consultation forum or a hub or a working group, or it may involve suggesting that there's a new sort of tech forum that is dedicated to sort of monitoring these type of impacts. And now I think I've gone on enough, but that we've got in our partnership approach model that we'll be circulating some really good examples of the types of better outcomes that can be achieved with higher levels of engagement. And the examples that we've had are not examples where the Good Work Algorithmic Impact Assessment has actually been used, because this is a new proposal that's building on a lot of work and good industrial practice from different sources, but they demonstrate how higher levels of consultation and better results in a number of ways is possible and achievable in the event that there is a process in which there are higher levels of engagement and agreement about how technology is introduced and what to do about it. This slide is very helpful, reminding me to point out that at IFOW, we're getting more practical. And so we are beginning to we're really keen on implementing the research we've done to pilot things and support unions practice and implement workplace impact assessments or anything else to do with understanding the introduction of technology. I hope that's enough to kick off the questions.
It absolutely is. Thank you, Anna. Oh, sorry. Thank you, Anna. That was really interesting to get us going. Really appreciate that. Just a reminder, our audience, we also like to hear about what's going on in your workplace. So do post, your experiences in the chat. If you've got a longer story to tell us, we always want to hear from you. So do email us at tuceducation@tuc.org.uk. We'll put that email address in the chat too. But we love to hear your short, or as long as you like, really, stories here also. So do tell us about them. We're going to hear next from Eugene, who is a CWU rep, a CWU rep and branch secretary for the CWU in South Wales. Before we came live, he told me that he works with an incredible 62 employers, which I thought was a huge number and very impressive. So we're going to hear from him now. First off, Eugene, please can you tell us a bit about the current situation around AI with the employers that you work with, please?
Yeah, so we're seeing AI spread amongst quite a lot of employers, sometimes in industries you may not imagine. The greatest when we see a lot of AI or have had issues with technology has been BT. They're pursuing it a great deal. I did notice they're one of your case studies, so I'm going to be interested to read what changes they've been making there. But you may have seen in the press that BT has cut 10,000 out of 50,000 jobs that they expect to make in the coming years. 10,000 of those are directly attributable to AI. So they say that they've realised £100 million worth of value in the past 18 months, and we'll see another £500 million in the next couple of years. And every company in the country is going to be looking to get their share of the £400 million that AI is said to be worth in the coming decade. So things are accelerating really quickly with AI. In BT itself, what used to take 6 months with specialists to create, they're now able to create in weeks with practically untrained staff. And they're able to do this because they're using AI and AI templates to create other AI. But if that sounds scary, don't worry, because they have a digital brain, which is another AI that monitors the AI, made by AI. But this is all part of their push to maximize the pound per petabyte, because they're a huge data company, data on their networks, on their systems, on their staff, and perhaps even on you if you're a customer. So a major national survey to gauge our members' awareness and concerns on the technologies took place in February, and the headlines we think speak for themselves. 80% of the 4,300 plus respondents suspected undisclosed AI was being used by their employers. Only 2.2% trusted any AI driven decision making at work. 77% doubted their employers would seek consent before implementing technologies, and over 87% were unaware about data that was being collected about them. Now, since then, we've embarked on an exercise to try and map these AI technologies and systems, and the list at the moment, which we expect to rise, is already encompassing 25 different systems in use. Now, there's two issues for us as trade unionists. It's the job losses, and we'll deal with that in the same way we normally deal with redundancies. But ignoring the societal impact, depending how large that is, our main issue is really to influence how work looks for the people who are left. So I can give you a few examples where I think some of the employers have been overstepping the mark. I'll just be clear, these aren't all BT examples. We do, as you said, look after several employers. So I could take a very a very simple one. One company, a large technology company, introduced computer decision making on expense claims. And I had a university leaver, it was their first job from university, submitted some expense claims. They did it, made a mistake in doing it. However, instead of it being, as it is in my organization, 2 humans who would sign off an expense claim, it went through an AI, which authorized it. The person knew that there was a problem was when they were dragged into a discipline meeting, gross misconduct, to lose their job. And the company took the view that although this was computer-based training from someone who, didn't have face-to-face, who was new to the business, the computer was right to authorize it. They were wrong to ask for it, and that person lost their job. In the end, it took starting a tribunal to get them compensated for that. So, you get these employers who think the computer is always right, and they're quite a sociopathic view towards their staff. Another area we often see is AI being used in surveillance. We're used to break monitoring, for example, in call centers, but now these companies are going a step further. In Swansea, one call center introduced AI, which monitored how people spoke. And it would mark them down if they paused too long or too often, if they spoke too fast or too slowly. And the AI even measured their emotional state using metrics such as their empathy and positivity. And whilst you may have heard of keystroke monitors, well, AI introduces keyword monitors. And we've had agents flagging up issues where they failed to promote a product using the keywords that the AI was expecting, and it's costing them £500 a month. And this is people who are otherwise minimum wage staff. So that's one area we're still working on. We've also seen some GPS-enabled AI systems. In one employer, this generates information showing things, for example, how long someone spends back in the depot. And this puts staff under pressure not to return for toilet breaks, not to return to canteens for lunch, and even to work unpaid time, and pressure to spend less time doing their vehicle safety checks so that the system didn't flag up that they were spending too long at their base. And this was also a part of a massive performance system which rated people and ranked them in league tables as it measured how long that their vehicle was near a job. And with that league table, then the management would target the people at the bottom of that league table. So we took many discipline cases and the threats of industrial action to try and stop this. We did reach an agreement where that data would be taken away from lower level management, and it would take a senior manager to authorize the looking into this system. The data that it was producing, which cut it down by from 100% of people being monitored to only 1% of people being monitored. But unfortunately, that company has decided to rebrand it and reintroduce it against union agreements. So that's something we're going to be launching a campaign on very shortly. So I can also give you some examples where we have had victories, though, where it's been good news. So there was another system that was used to monitor driving habits, people's braking techniques, their speed, and all of this is presented to them on a terminal in the form of an app. And this system would also prompt a manager when it thought that someone had been a bad driver, so they could be pulled in. This caused our members a great deal of stress, who thought that they were under threat of losing their job. Despite not doing anything illegal, despite not even getting a parking ticket or anything, but because the computer said that it was unacceptable, they were being brought in. So we organized our members and told them, well, don't download this app, don't cooperate with it. We'll if there's an issue, we'll deal with it via discipline if necessary. But eventually the employer backed off. It's now only voluntary, and they've taken a positive approach in that instead of people being pulled in for any things that the system brings up, they will instead be sent on a driving course. Although I must say not many people are volunteering for any of that, because of course when you introduce these things you break trust. Now, this one is actually a BT example I've got for you, and this was a recent victory that we had where they were considering an AI-enabled dash cam. And the one facing outwards would have been very helpful because it could alert the driver to pedestrians, speed limits and things like that. But we had issue with the inward-facing camera, which had would have had the ability for managers to view a video stream, listen to conversations, perhaps when taking a call from your partner during your lunch break. The AI would also text managers if it detected you holding a mobile phone, and even report you for yawning. Now, despite our suggestions to remove the inward-facing element and instead replace it with a rear view camera to aid vehicles reversing, bearing in mind these don't have rear windscreens, so a camera would be really helpful because this was introduced on the back of safety, allegedly. They wouldn't agree. So on the 26th of February at about 4 o'clock, we emailed all the staff to advise them that we'd be launching a very public campaign against this surveillance and invasion of privacy. And by 8 o'clock, the company responded to staff denying that they were considering it, despite the fact that we had been in talks with them and their own managers had been on the workplace Facebook promoting the inevitability of this coming in. So afraid of the kickback and the bad press, we were able to kill that. Probably the fastest national victory ever, 4 hours. That's all it took. So that was good. But it's not all bad news with AI, though. It has been able to allow for upskilling opportunities, and we'll always look for those with companies. For example, years ago, we'd have specialist desk-based planners who would be working on computers, basically like architects, network architects, drawing out how networks would do, mapping them and planning. Unfortunately, a similar sort of system to what you'd see with GPS was introduced, where you could put a point A and point B and the computer would work out exactly where cables would be run. So that made these people slightly defunct, or certainly a large number of them no longer required. However, what the company was able to do was merge this with another job. And I think Anna was speaking about this earlier, how you can create new roles out of old ones. And it was mixed with a surveyor's job. So these people became field-based planners. So they can do some work on the computer, although that's much more efficient now, thanks to the new tools. But they also get more insight into what's actually happening down on the ground because they're out mobile. So not only did this save jobs for those people, but it enabled a career pathway for engineers to go into, because they may not have had the the certificates, etc., to be a planner at first, but they did have knowledge of engineering, and so it's made it more available to workers who otherwise may not have been considered for those roles. And it's been quite successful in doing that. Yeah, so that's my examples. I can give you my thoughts on how we're going to tackle it going forward. So our role at present is very much as a critic. And I mean, I personally feel that companies are avoiding scrutiny and accountability. But in some instances, the veil has been lifted on some of these companies. There was one senior director who said people need to get with AI or look for another job, that it's the future at the end of the day, and horses didn't go on strike when cars were invented. But no, they did go to the knacker's yard and get turned to glue, though. So I don't think it's a very good story for workers. Now, AI as it is currently gives no protection for people who wish to operate it in a sociopathic nature. And we can see the iteration and layering of technology on technology. So we think it's really important that we get involved now at this early stage, and that from inception to operation, to ensure that our members are protected. And whilst companies do make promises and values and sometimes even fluffy policies on their websites, it's only with the use of hard measurable impact assessments that we can be certain that things are done correctly. So that's why I think the AI impact tool is going to be absolutely vital when hopefully the TUC Employment and AI Bill is made into law as soon as possible. Our approach at the CWU is going to be to build competency We want to enhance our members' knowledge and understanding of AI. We're going to empower our members, equipping them to critically evaluate new technologies. We will seize the benefits, advocating for a shorter working week with no loss in pay and continuous skill development. And we want to establish governance to implement a technology agreement across our employers. But right now, what I'd say to union reps is the best thing you can do to protect your members is to ensure you have a good network of eyes and ears on the ground, that we do the AI TUC AI training course, and always be vigilant for the telltale signs of AI at play. And we must ensure that we're always in a position where we can challenge things industrially on a ground floor if we can't get the companies to see sense morally.
Eugene, thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us. And I think what is particularly helpful for our audience to take away is those kind of headlines that you set out at the end of this is what reps can do in the workplace. And I'm very aware that we ask a lot of our workplace reps. You know, we appreciate that you're volunteers. You often have a part or full-time job alongside your duties as a rep. But talking to members, finding out what's happening on the shop floor, like Eugene said, eyes and ears in the workplace to be aware and able to spot really when things might be happening. I think that's a key consideration. Okay, I'm going to move to some of the questions we've had submitted. We'll try and get through as many of them as we can, but we've had quite a lot, so we'll do our best. So we've had a few questions about particular sectors that we've not really touched on so far. So I'm going to ask you both just to see what you think might be the things to look out for in these particular sectors. So education, schools, colleges, universities, what things do we anticipate might change in these areas with AI? We'll come to you first, Anna, and then perhaps you, Eugene, if you've got any thoughts as well.
These are really good questions, and that's a particularly good one, I think, Anna. And perhaps I could start off by highlighting that the model is like an overarching model, but it's absolutely right that it will apply and can be developed by not just at a firm level, but by a sector and a domain level, and that the way it sort of kicks in and the way it bites, in particular, the action that will be needed, is very different according to whether it's the health sector or the education sector or the creative sector or any other or transport sector or anything else. So each of those sectors have concern in terms of what we know. Is the particular example was teaching, was it? No, so we've not done a dedicated program only on teaching, but we know that it's up there in terms of implementation, that it's being used a lot, not just AI, but other related tools. Teaching, I think, is an interesting one because it can be used. It's more obvious, perhaps, that it can be used to help teachers. It could be used to help teachers do their jobs or to learn, to learn. So it perhaps really highlights the fact that you need to be aware and emphasize the good and do that in very close consultation with the teachers, because they will know how it's being used and how to use it better than anybody else, versus the negative side. In a way, it's a softer example teaching as well, because it's widely understood, I think, in education, that it's not going to substitute a teacher, that it's going to be very much about the worker that a teacher and the AI tool sort of working in collaboration. Now that's another example of an industry that's been made. I think of the creative sectors. I can see that in the chat. So that's a complicated one. And we in fact had a session on that, bigger session on that yesterday. We think it's a good example of how you really do need an overarching regulatory framework, but there is going to be needed specific protection in areas like IP, or contracts. So where as the question quite rightly reminds everybody, that work that done by creatives, not just freelancers, but including freelancers and others, will be used to change the system. It's also, I think, a reminder for everybody that to think not just about when it's gone wrong and applications, but right the way through the design and development of the system from procurement onwards.
Thanks, Anna. That was really helpful. Eugene, I know your examples obviously come from communications, but have you got any thoughts you could apply to education or the creative industries?
Well, I did see a demonstration about a month ago. You probably all did on YouTube. Was Open AI and or Chat GPT-O, that one of the demonstrations they used was a child learning trigonometry using a tablet, but instead of it just being an ordinary like computer program, you know, as we used to on laptops, it was able to speak to them, correct them, take voice commands back and forth. So I would always be wary of that myself. Anything that management could look at and say, oh, that could replace an assistant. Even if it can't, quite often these, you know, technologies are brought in and they make it work after, or they attempt to make it work after. But yeah, I completely agree. The framework is important, and particularly the creative industries, where we've seen graphic artists in the video game industry, journalists having their content stolen and being repurposed online, or even if it's just your work being used to train models. Companies training these AIs have as little respect for IP and people's personal data as they do their own employees when they're collecting it. And I think this, whether it's AI surveillance or your own data rights, I think this is these are all interlinked now, and they're going to be big issues for us to tackle. Regardless of what industry you're in, at some point you're going to be affected by it.
Go for it.
Just adding a point on the creatives, just remembering the states, I think, you know, the Writers Guild and the federations, the Directors Guild and the Equity Federation, the states have got some fantastic examples there of how, in fact, you know, with an anticipatory response, there have been some very direct and specific, you know, reframing and re-agreement, you know, about the sort of types of contracts and assurances that can be given to creatives.
Thank you, Anna. Okay, next question. I think we can apply to all sectors. So I'm going to put it to you first, Eugene. What are the key questions that reps should ask employers, maybe when they're at that initial research stage of AI? Can you give us some examples of things that you've maybe asked some of the employers you've worked with?
Well, the obvious one is, are you using AI? Sometimes they will be honest and come out right and tell you, and sometimes it can surprise you. I learned one company was using AI. For example, they were putting health and safety information into it to see if there were common trends and things like that. But ultimately, it's asking where the data, for a lot of the times data is presented in reports, and it's asking how is that data derived, where does it come from, and how it's put together. Because a lot of the times issues you'll get on the ground will be from managers who either don't understand where it's come from and therefore are prone to make mistakes in interpreting the information, or simply haven't been advised themselves. Mm-hmm. So the first point of call is finding out if it's there. It is difficult with AI because people will call all sorts of things AI, and I suppose as soon as we regulate AI, they'll try and call it something else. But it's ultimate. It's the next level of automation really is the key, and it's the data gathering and the use of it and the recommendations are key. So, for example, we've had people in sick cases, and we know, well, that's in this particular employer we may use the Bradford factor or some trigger system, and all of a sudden you end up with 5 or 6 cases and they're not hitting these triggers, and then it turns out, oh well, I've called this person in because a thing popped up on my computer screen telling me to do so, and then you find out through the background, oh, there's a new HR system being used here, and it's you know, it's introducing these things. So yeah, at any time it smells a bit fishy, start asking the questions really. But of course, I imagine most reps will hopefully already be doing that.
Let's hope so.
In the resources, there are some checklists about that. Our research really backs up actually what Eugene said, that it's most important to start, you know, that's the starting point, how it's being used, and that it's really helpful as well to try and ask your employer, if there's been no agreement before then, what the remit and the purpose is, so what it is and what it's being applied for, so what the anticipated use is, what the anticipated, I suppose, value creation is, what the point is, from the perspective of the employer, and if that can be sort of added into the basic checklist about what it is and who's effective, our research suggests that will elicit some really good and useful information.
That's great, Anna. And we will, one of the questions is, can we share, documents after us? We absolutely will. We'll share web links, the PowerPoint, the video, all of that stuff. So, okay, that was really helpful. Thank you. Can you say a little bit more about what areas of the law reps can use at the moment when negotiating with employers? We know that we want this new legislation to be implemented, but we don't know when that might be. What can we do in the meantime? Anna, do you want to start with this one?
Yes, so we do think that collective bargaining and that process, setting that up, is probably is for this assessment, which goes further than the exit law as it is, or pushes that, the best perhaps entry point. But it's also right that a number of other laws are going to be sort of engaged potentially, and they may have sort of easier or more obvious access points. Our model in a way is a wraparound of all those together, but they do exist as freestanding things anyway. So they include health and safety law, unfair dismissal law, equality law, so discrimination law, working time laws, data protection law, and information and consultation law. So basically all the laws that you'll already be familiar with in terms of sort of compliance and use are likely to be, or potentially will be, engaged. And this model sort of doesn't supersede those. It kind of wraps them round and makes, and I suppose we hope, and it helps you and able to think, sort of picks, which ones you can develop and build on to as best industrial practice before the law changes, as Eugene says.
Absolutely, yeah. We obviously hope that will, but that's really great in the meantime. Eugene, I've got a different question for you. In the workplaces you've been working with already, have you come to a technology agreement with any of those employers? If you have, what sort of things have they contained, if you're able to share that with us, please?
We haven't come to any specific AI agreements that I'm aware of. There is another union, I know someone in the Q&A said about prospective created an AI charter, so I'll be looking that up. So that'll be quite interesting to see what they've got there. We tend to make agreements on how technology is applied without getting too deep into, well, in the past, without getting too deep into how that technology is derived. But it is very much a focus of ours now, going forward, that we're going to have to be, because it was easy before when things were collected by some bit of kit or some device that would generate information. You could just ask for access to that information. It might have been reams and reams of paper, but you could get it and read it. But when you're talking about systems which are collating and making decisions and recommendations of it, understanding exactly how that works is going to be crucial in us knowing whether or not the system is performing correctly or is treating someone unfairly.
Absolutely. And that actually leads on to my next question, which is about equalities. We've had a specific question about what considerations we need to make around members who have a disability, and around risk assessments, for example. But I want to broaden that out and think of the equalities agenda across all equalities angles, really. What do we need to think about there, please? Anna, do you want to go first?
Yes, it's an excellent question, and it's a very complicated question. But sort of in a nutshell, to try and sort of capture some of the key things that's coming out from our work and the work of the TUC AI group and others as well, is that AI has the kind of tendency or a potential to exacerbate things. So that can happen in a positive way. It can, in theory, help you understand patterns of resource to allow intervention. But the thing that we're most aware of and most concerned about is that it's also got the potential to learn from discriminatory or other unfair forms of behaviour, and without kind of intervention or awareness of that, or surfacing information about it so that action can then be taken, it may exaggerate it. It may learn sort of automatically that this is what's a good thing, and this is and this should be on a larger scale, not increased or I can't think of the word right now, but it'll be effectively magnified, and that's something we've known about for several years. It's now sort of more widely on the radar. It usually involves a kind of technical bias audit, so I think it's a very reasonable ask to request one of that. But our research is also suggesting that just a bias audit on its own is going to miss things, and that you do have to have direct engagement with people with exposure and with union representatives to surface information about different types of unequal impact that just may not otherwise be visible, or it may not otherwise be possible to access, and do that before the damage is done to an individual who then needs to go, of course, their representative for support.
Thanks, Anna. I mean, hopefully as union reps, you've in other changes, you've perhaps carried out or worked with management to carry out an equality impact assessment. By all means, this can be done in this situation too, monitoring the same things, but for with the specific angle of AI and technology in general. Okay, I think we've got time for one more question, which has just come in. Is there anything around privacy that a rep could use to dissuade an employer from using these monitoring systems? I mean, Eugene, you've mentioned already the monitoring systems that you referenced. Was privacy ever an issue? Is it something that we can use?
I'd certainly hope so. It's we often use the company's own policies against it with regards to when they're collecting data and then using it for other purposes, or where they're breaching the intent of certain systems. For example, you might have a system where a manager could press a button to see where everyone was, and that's used for emergencies. If you need to find someone quickly, you could do it. But then we found some people would be pressing that over and over and over again to try and get around the barriers that were put in the way of active surveillance of people. So where they get information from is important, but we do see people trying to get around that. For example, we've seen employers who are effectively spying on people's Facebook accounts. Although that's against company policy to do it, what they'll do is they'll get their one of their lackeys to send it in anonymously and go, "Oh, we had an anonymous report that this guy said something about me on Facebook." So yeah, it is quite difficult. But ultimately, whether you're going to tackle them with GDPR, whether you're going to go to the Information Commissioner's office over breaches, ultimately as workplace reps, we want to resolve these problems before it gets that far. Once you start talking about the law on a ground level, really you've practically already lost that battle, because you're going to have to take it above their heads. And that's what's great about having the things in place beforehand, and why this law changed, because once that's in their mind, then it's a threat you can use rather than as a defense that you've got to rely on.
I think that's a great point, Eugene, that having this in place before the problem arises. That's why we have workplace agreements on lots of different issues. Any final thoughts on the privacy angle, Anna, before we wrap up?
Yeah, as Eugene said, the sort of main forum for thinking about that at the moment is the data protection regime, which was subject anyway to going to be subject to some changes, although those were scrapped for the moment. So for now, it's the GPDR. We did actually do some guidance with Prospects Union about how unions could utilise data protection impact assessments, which we perhaps could add to our resources. And it's also right that the Information Commissioner's Office have made the argument jointly with us, actually, that you can argue that data protection is meant to protect fundamental rights, and that good work is a fundamental right, or a series of fundamental rights. So you could, again, at the risk of sounding like a one-trick pony, use the data protection impact assessment regime, even though there's no requirement to disclose that, to sort of insert or a good work algorithmic impact assessment. That won't be an easy argument, but it's worth perhaps a try.
Thank you, Anna. Okay, we've been talking about this for an hour, which has been incredibly interesting. I've learnt loads from both you, Anna, and Eugene, from your real life practical examples in the workplaces that you are involved with. Thank you both for that. We really appreciate it. Thank you to you, the audience, for some really insightful questions and sharing your thoughts and experiences. We do hope you found it as useful, well, as I have. We'll be sharing the recording of today and any resources tomorrow morning, so you can look forward to those in your inboxes tomorrow. And we will be actually issuing you with a digital credential to say that you've attended today. So you'll be able to share that with your members, with your employer, with your union, to say, look, this is what I learned on this webinar. So thank you very much for joining today, and see you soon for another TUC webinar event. Bye-bye for now.